Okay. So to understand my personal connection with the subject of this Deerfield talk, you would have to go all the way back to the First World War with my great-grandfather, who fought for this nation, the Kingdom of Italy. In addition to being a machine gunner in his platoon, he was also in charge of mapping out the battlefield, and as a result, he became obsessed with maps. When he came to America in the 1920s, this obsession came with him. My mother often remembers my great-grandfather staying up late at night studying maps, just because he felt more comfortable studying them and understanding the surroundings. Now, this obsession stays with me, and I think maps are great. I like maps. Ever since I was a little kid, I had a Scrambled States of America board game, I had a map of the United States on my wall, and I even had a shower curtain that was a map of the world. Now, one day I took it upon myself. All right, Matthew, you're going to count the number of countries on that shower curtain. And the answer I received was 190. I thought, okay, problem solved, that's that. But the world has changed quite a bit since then, and this is the question I posed to you today for my Deerfield talk. How many countries are there in the world? Now, in order to answer this question, first we need to define what exactly a country is. And the definition is very vague. It is simply an area of land that is controlled by its own government. But this raises quite a bit of issues, because for a country to be considered a country, other established countries need to recognize the country in question as a country. I know, a little bit confusing. But that's why, if you were to look at a map of the world, you couldn't just count all of the countries on there. That'd be wrong. Because a map of the world from the United States perspective is going to look a little bit different from a map of the world from the Chinese perspective. So, in answering this question, we need to be very careful. Like, for example, 2 people in the audience might disagree whether Palestine is a country or not, and 2 people in the audience might disagree whether Taiwan is a part of China, as it's seen here, or it's its own separate country. Now, you might think that a group like the UN, or FIFA, or the International Olympic Committee, or maybe even the United States has come to some sort of consensus on this number, but they have not. There's quite a discrepancy there. And it all gets back to this very vague definition, which groups like FIFA and the International Olympic Committee use to their advantage, because they want to inflate their numbers and say they have over 200 members. So, for example, we have Puerto Rico and Guam. They both compete in the FIFA World Cup, and they have world rankings. They both compete in the Olympics, but no one would disagree that Puerto Rico and Guam are part of the United States. So, to answer this question, let's start with the United Nations. That's what most people would think of when they think of how many countries there are. We thought, they'd have a good answer. And the United Nations isn't so much a right of countries to have, more as it is an exclusive club. And in order to get into the club, you need to pass initiation from this group, the UN Security Council, which is comprised of 15 countries, starting with these big 5. Now, the big 5 are the only 5 nations on the Security Council that have a permanent seat, and they have something called veto power, which means that if they do not want a country to be a part of the United Nations, that country does not become a part of the United Nations. Now, the other 10 countries don't really have a name, so we'll just call them the other 10. And these countries here. He's a pretty cool guy. We've been meaning to get brunch for a while. So these rest of the 10 countries here, they serve 2-year terms, and they're elected by the full United Nations General Assembly. So let's look at a country that recently tried to apply to the United Nations with the Republic of Kosovo. Now, Kosovo, located in the southeastern part of Europe, and if you don't know where that is, it's the yellow country right there. So, Kosovo, they said they're a republic. They want to break away from Serbia and become their own independent country. So when they were put to the vote of this big council here, the big 5, the United States and United Kingdom said, yes, you are a country, as did France. But China and Russia said no. China and Russia just see Kosovo as a rebellious little part of Serbia, more so than a full independent country, which is a little bit disappointing for Kosovo. And as a result, they have a website where they thank all of the countries in the world that recognize it as a country by thanking them in their own language. They even have little hearts, and I think it's kind of adorable. So, back to the scoreboard. We have 193 member nations of the United Nations plus 2 Now, what is that two? That two are these so-called non-member observer states. Now, the two non-member observer states are the Vatican City. The Vatican City is recognized by the United States and most countries around the world as a country, but they simply do not want to join the UN. The other non-member observer in question is the State of Palestine, which very desperately wants to become a member of the United Nations. They have applied, and the United States used its veto power to say, no, Palestine, I'm sorry, you can't join our club. However, the UN General Assembly, in a vote afterward, voted that Palestine could obtain non-member observer status. So, just to recap really quickly, there are 193 member countries of the UN and 2 observer states. The United States recognizes 195 countries on the other hand. The non-members are the Holy See and the State of Palestine, and the United States recognizes 193 members, plus the Vatican and the Republic of Kosovo, which the UN does not recognize, and the United States does not recognize the State of Palestine as anything. Now, so first we're going to look at the United Kingdom. This is one of the examples of countries where, there's a little bit of confusion, because the United Kingdom is really a country of countries. In the map on the left, you see the United Kingdom, all in blue, and it is comprised of the 4 constituent countries as seen in the map on the right. You have England in white, Scotland in blue, Wales in green, and Northern Ireland there in gray. Now, Northern Ireland is a little bit confusing because instead of a constituent country, it's technically a principality, but for the sake of keeping things simple, we will give them the flag that they used up until 1971 and just say that they are a country. Now, to understand how these 4 constituent countries all become one United Kingdom, you need to go here, Parliament. Now, Parliament has 1,400 seats, each with representation from each of the 4 constituent countries. Now, Parliament does not have control over every single little aspect of life in these countries, so in addition to Parliament, Wales and Northern Ireland have assemblies, and Scotland even has another parliament. So if you are in the United Nations, or you're a member of the UN and you want to do business with Scotland, England, Wales, you don't do it with them, you do it with the whole of the United Kingdom. Recently though, Scotland tried to break away from the UK and become independent. Point of pride for a lot of Scottish people. But this raised quite a few questions, such as what kind of government would they have now? What kind of currency would they use? Who would be in charge? And finally, could they successfully apply to the United Nations and the European Union? In an overwhelming referendum where 97% of possible voters turned out for the vote, they voted 55% against independence, 45% for, so for now, Scotland will stay in the United Kingdom. So when it comes to counting these 4 quote-unquote countries, when coming to our number, we need to count them as one United Kingdom. Next, we need to ask ourselves, the real China has to stand up, because in case you did not know, there are 2 countries that are claiming to be China. The People's Republic of China, which is what most people think of when they think of China, and the Republic of China, otherwise known as Taiwan or Chinese Taipei. Now, to understand the roots of this conflict, you have to go back before the Second World War, when there was one Republic of China. After the war, communists showed up and eventually drove the Republic of China to the tiny little island of Taiwan. This, however, created quite a few problems, because they both claimed that they were the legitimate governments of China. One had most of the people and most of the land, the other one had the power and the seat at the United Nations. That was until 1971, where the nameplate switched from the Republic of China to the People's Republic of China. In response, the Taiwanese thought, okay, we need to get back into the United Nations. So, let's apply. Let's apply under the name of the Republic of Taiwan. Maybe the Chinese might change their mind, but the Chinese still had the same answer. They still said no. If you were to go to Taiwan today, though, it's about as country-like of a country you can get without being recognized as a country, if that makes sense. They issue their own passports. They have their own very scary military and government. They compete in the World Cup and the Olympic Games under the pseudonym Chinese Taipei, because nowadays you really do not want to make China angry. And relations between the 2 countries are pretty good nowadays. They agree that Taiwan should not be independent. There's only one China. The only problem is, who rules that China? Who is the real China? And until this question is answered, we're never going to know. So is Taiwan a country? By the textbook dictionary definition, it is, but many countries don't officially recognize it because China says that we shouldn't. I know, poor Taiwan. So, back to the original question. How many countries are there in the world? Well, it's a trick question. You can't come to one specific answer, because depending on who you ask, they're going to have a different answer. And for me, that is where the problem lies. I feel that if the world can come to some sort of a consensus on this answer, we can simplify many of the world's problems, which boil down to just border disputes and whose resources belong to whom, and we can work towards better solutions for the future.